out a new way to stream to you today, which is why I might look a little confused right now. Just trying to get it up on my screen. So it's Laura today because we're going to talk about some family law things. And welcome to day 472 of COVID isolation. I know I keep kind of upping the ante on how long this is lasting, but I think we all kind of feel that way a little bit. So, you know, if you're like me, then you had lofty goals on Sunday because we've been in this for so long, and it's been difficult sometimes to have some positive attitudes about things. But if you're like me, you had lofty goals on Sunday of having a great week. And then it pretty much all went to hell by about 10 a.m. yesterday on Monday. So I'm isolating alone, but I know many of you have been locked down with children and spouses, and some things have been, kind of bubbling up with all that time spent together or alone, like if you're like me. So for me, it's been the things that have been bubbling up have been my addiction to Reese's peanut butter cup minis. I buy them by the family pack, and I eat them all, and they're fabulous. Keep them in the freezer or the fridge, and they taste even better. Also had a friend send me a case of Thin Mints, Girl Scout Thin Mints, which are amazing in the freezer. So basically chocolate and sweets in general have been one of the things that I've been dealing with. But also I've had a lot of empathy-induced stomach pains, thinking about, my clients, what they're going through right now, my friends, just the general population of people, because it's really just been kind of crazy for everyone. For you, it might be frustration with having to deal with new math. Why can't you just carry the one when you're talking about additions and subtractions and that kind of thing? But it could be also those conversations that you've been having with your spouse about getting separated, and those conversations have maybe gotten longer, more focused on the target of divorce, whatever it might be. And today we'd like to talk to you about some things that you can do to prepare and protect yourself if you are thinking about getting a divorce. Our goal here at MyVirtual.Lawyer is to help you work through things with your spouse so that you can come to an agreed solution on things like asset division and child custody, that kind of thing, sharing, co-parenting. But that doesn't always work. It just kind of depends on your situation and the people involved. Sometimes there are a lot of hard feelings or bad actions that have taken place. But no matter the situation, I want to talk to you today about some things that you can do to kind of prepare and start thinking about what you need to when you're talking about separation from your spouse. Number one, we're going to talk about kids. And most of you know that is one of my hot button topics. I love protecting children and making sure that they're put at the forefront of everyone's brain in pretty much any situation that they're in or that I help them with. So if you have children under the age of 18, you need to think long and hard and without personal emotions about what's best for your children in the breakup. That's sometimes hard, doing it without the personal emotions if your wife cheated on you, or if you just don't really like them right now. It doesn't mean they're a bad co-parent. So try to think about kind of what's best for your children if you have children under the age of 18 that are living with you. Also, financial support with those kids. First of all, where are they going to live? If they're going to live primarily with one parent, what does visitation look like? Is it joint custody with 1 week on, 1 week off? There are all sorts of considerations there. But financial support is a big one that comes up as well. And that's called child support when you're talking about a divorce with kids. For those of you that watched my Facebook Live a few weeks ago, you know that child support calculations are changing on June 1st pretty significantly. And it's going to dramatically alter people's understanding of what financial support is, child support, when it comes to getting a divorce, and what the obligations of each parent look like. If you didn't get a chance to watch it, it's still on our Facebook page. So please go back on our Facebook page here and try to catch that, because it's a more detailed discussion from a few weeks ago about those changes, because they are pretty significant. especially when you're talking about with one of the parent having primary custody. Arkansas is the default joint custody state. So if you can't agree on custody and visitation, then one of the things that you get to do is let a judge decide for you. And that's the default that they will go towards, is true joint custody, which often means 1 week on, 1 week off. If that's not ideal for you, it's in your best interest and in the children's best interest to have that conversation and figure out what you guys can agree to, because it's never a good idea to have a judge tell you what to do, especially when it comes to your children, because you just couldn't come to an agreement. So keep that in mind. If you have a judge talking about it, then Arkansas, like I said, is a joint custody state. So it's not in anybody's best interest to have the judge just kind of set that default for you. Another thing to kind of think about is that an attorney can really help you navigate all of these questions and offer advice and opinions based on their experience. I've been practicing family law for a while now, and I used to do domestic violence specifically with family law. And it's, it helps to have the experiences of someone who's been in court and knows and understands. And even though we practice law a little bit differently here at MyVirtual.Lawyer, we still are, both Brooke and I have been in this world for a long time, and our experiences and our advice and kind of helping you work through things, that's kind of what we're best at. And an attorney is really helpful when it comes to making these decisions and helping you have those conversations with your spouse. Number 2, we're going to talk about property. And when I say property, I mean what the legal term of real property is. And real property is, do you own a house? Do you own land? If you own a house together, then who's going to stay in the house? Are you going to sell it? If one person's going to stay in the house, can they afford to refinance the house into their name only, or can they not? It's, these are all things that you need to kind of consider and talk about. With, post 2016, we had kind of another financial weirdness with loans and everything for real property, for land and for homes. It's changing a little bit right now because of the pandemic and what that's doing to the economy, but it's not drastically different compared to what it was like maybe in 2015. So, if you're really thinking about this as an option where one person wants to stay in the house, maybe it's because it's in the kid's school district or whatever it might be, then you might want to call your lender. Most people own their house outright, so maybe call your lender and talk about what it looks like for your particular situation. If maybe, for example, you are wanting to stay in the house with the children, but you are not the primary breadwinner in your family. So can you afford to have the other spouse's name taken off of the mortgage and have it financed only in your name? These are conversations that you need to have with people who know what the market is and know kind of what the options are for refinancing loans. And that's going to be best had with your current lender. And you can also kind of reach out and see about refinancing with other people. But that's something that is very important to kind of jump on, because whatever you put in the papers for your divorce decree, when it comes to any owned property together, then you really kind of need to have a plan of action of how you're going to execute those changes. Another thing to think about with land is, we're in Arkansas. We're a beautiful state. We're the natural state for a reason. There's a lot of land out there, and people are surprised sometimes when like a grandparent dies or something like that they own these little plots of land in different places, or they have maybe a partial interest in land because their grandparent or their parent passed away and gave them, partial rights with a sibling or something like that. So these types of things, again, it's all needs to be addressed. And so it's best to kind of get everything in one place. And I'll talk about that next when it comes to, figuring out what you're going to do with the real property that you have. And again, real property, meaning your home, your land, anything that you pay property taxes that aren't your car or something like that. So the third thing we're going to talk about is money and other assets. Money is one of those things where it can get even trickier than figuring out what to do with your children. And there is a worksheet that the Arkansas courts provide called an affidavit of financial means. And whenever we work with clients, we try to make sure that they have access to that affidavit of financial means to fill out for themselves, because what it does is, in some courts actually require it anyway, but it's extremely helpful to get everything in one place. All of your debts, all of your credit cards, all of your, any loans, anything like that, any payments that you make on things, any retirement accounts, any bank accounts, anything like that, you have it listed kind of in one place so that you can, when you go and sit down and have that conversation with your spouse, nothing's hidden, nothing's, oh, I think that we have this or that. Everything's just there in that one place. So that's a really good worksheet to have. You can find it on the Arkansas court's website. So that's something that you can go look for yourself if you want to. Something I will mention, because here at MVL, we do try to work towards an amicable divorce as much as possible. Sometimes there's a path to get to that place where it's agreeable and actually uncontested. If you hear those words thrown out there, it's not uncontested until both people sign that final paper. But that's what we work towards here. But, certain situations, there might be money issues in your marriage that have partially led you to want to get divorced anyway. Or if you think there might be an issue because, things have been said or whatever, there are things that we suggest that you do right away when it comes to money. First, open a separate bank account. It's still considered marital money until your divorce is final, but it's easier for you to be able to pull from, that type of account that is in your name only. Excuse me. That's in your name only, so that you have better control and better tracking on spending. So instead of having the joint accounts for everything, it's best to go ahead and open your own account, checking account or whatever it might be. Again, still marital money, but it just allows you to have more control over what's in there. Another thing, if things are a little bit more, weird or, getting a little bit more antagonistic, then consider putting a credit freeze on your name if you think your spouse may be sneaky and might open debt-based accounts like credit cards and things like that in your name without your knowledge. That happens, unfortunately, more than you think it does. And so if you think that that's a possibility, it doesn't hurt to put a credit freeze on your name so that you're alerted whenever anybody tries to open a new account, and you can kind of deal with that when it happens. It's kind of, it's a little bit of a dire resort or something like that, but at the same time, it happens more than you think. And just kind of, again, we're talking about protecting yourself and being prepared for, when you get divorced and the things that you need to be thinking about. No one likes to talk about negative things. Every time I talk to anybody about planning for a will or a trust or powers of attorney in case they are incapacitated, in case they can't talk for themselves if they're in the hospital, that kind of thing, most people like to avoid. We are an avoidance culture of people. We truly are. And, it's one of those things that you really shouldn't be ashamed or embarrassed when working through the emotions of filing for divorce. I know that we're kind of in a world where it does seem, people say it's a failure, but it's not a failure in my opinion. And you'd be surprised. A lot of people don't feel like it is either. It's 2020 and we are no longer in the days of people's lifespan being, dying when they're 40. And so if you've been married for 20 years and you're just 40 now, you might have changed or, things might have just gotten to a point where you guys have both agreed to move on. It's not something to be embarrassed about. It's not something to be ashamed of when you're working through those emotions. It's best to keep a level head and work for the best solution to your family. And that's true, especially if you have children, but even if you don't, it doesn't help anybody's sanity or long-term emotional health to be combative and fight with each other about everything. So just kind of keep that in mind. And Brooke and I will be sharing a preparation checklist in paper form, in electronic paper form, in the coming days. So please, I'm going to go ahead and put a link below this video that allows you to sign up for our newsletter so that you can get notified when that preparation checklist is available. And that way you have something kind of that you can go by and check things off as you're discussing things with your spouse or preparing to have that discussion with your spouse. So thank you so much for your time today. It took a little bit longer than I normally do, partially just because I tried this new platform, and so I was kind of a little bit all over the place with my screen. But join us next week. Brooke and I will be back together, or Brooke will be here alone. We don't know. It's a surprise for us every Monday too, and when we make the decision. So join us next week at 11:30 a.m. and you guys have an amazing week. I hope that my week gets better and that your week is amazing, and we'll see you here next week. Thank you so much.